If you were to go out right now and hire a top-tier therapist, I mean, someone who specializes in the absolute gold standard
Right, yeah.
treatment for anxiety, what are you actually looking at in terms of cost?
Oh, you're easily looking at thousands of dollars a year, without question.
Right.
Because for high-level cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, the hourly rates are, well, they're significant. And that's because the results are empirically backed. It's the industry standard for a reason.
It is. But today's deep dive is, it's going to be a bit disruptive to that billing model.
Highly disruptive.
Yeah, because we're looking at a source that argues the core mechanism of that expensive therapy, the actual engine that makes CBT work, was actually written down in a single paragraph about 2,000 years ago.
It is a really bold premise, to say the least.
Seriously.
We are analyzing a lecture today from the channel GW Nima, and it's titled Philippians 4.8 Isn't Good Advice. It's a clinical protocol. And frankly, the title tells you everything you need to know about the angle here.
It really does. Because usually when people hear Philippians 4.8, the famous list, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is just...
Right, the coffee mug verse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You picture a needlepoint pillow at grandma's house or a bumper sticker. It's almost always categorized as this soft, poetic suggestion to just think happy thoughts.
Completely. It's categorized as spiritual fluff, just a gentle morale booster. But the central thesis of our source today is that we have completely miscategorized this text.
Completely.
The argument is that Paul the Apostle wasn't writing poetry here at all. He was documenting a rigorous, step-by-step clinical protocol for cognitive restructuring.
Which essentially means we are looking at the blueprint for CBT centuries before psychology was even a recognized field of study.
That is the claim. And to be clear right up front, the source isn't saying prayer is magic in some vague sense.
Right.
They are actively bridging ancient scripture with modern neuroscience to explain why this specific sequence of mental actions physically changes the brain structure. It's about biology as much as it is about theology.
So let's get right into that biology. Because the source opens with a specific frustration that, well, I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people tuning in. They call it the peace gap.
The peace gap, it's such a great way to describe it. The source highlights a really common cycle. Someone feels anxious, right? So they read the verses right before this, Philippians 4.6 and 7, which basically say, be anxious for nothing, let your requests be made known to God.
Which is standard advice.
Exactly. So they do that, they pray, they dump all their worries out, and they might feel a momentary sense of relief. They feel a little lighter for the evening.
But then Tuesday morning hits, the alarm goes off, the emails start flooding in, and that knot in the stomach is right back where it was.
Precisely. And the source argues that this happens because people treat prayer as the entire solution, whereas Paul treats it as merely the first step.
Yeah.
There is a vital distinction made here between prayer and meditation.
And this was the first moment in the research where I really had to stop and pay attention. Because how exactly are they defining that distinction? In modern language, we use them interchangeably so often. Or we just think of meditation as sitting quietly in a room.
They explain it functionally. Prayer, in this context, invites peace. It changes your relational standing. You are handing over the burden. But meditation, specifically the kind Paul describes in the very next verse, trains the brain to receive and sustain that peace.
Okay, so prayer changes the situation or the relationship, but meditation actually changes the neurology.
That's the argument. Think of it biologically. Your thoughts shape your emotions, and your emotions drive your neurochemistry.
Right.
If you pray for peace, but then immediately return to ruminating on some catastrophe, your brain is still physically wired to produce cortisol and adrenaline. You haven't changed the machine.
It's like cleaning your house to invite a guest over, but leaving the front door locked. You did the prep work, but you didn't actually open the channel for them to enter.
Or perhaps a better analogy is that you invited the guest, but your house is so full of hoarders' clutter that there's nowhere for them to even sit down.
That's a great way to put it.
The source argues that Paul knew peace doesn't stay unless the mind is retrained to house it. That is why he didn't stop at verse 7. He immediately pivots to verse 8, which is the mechanism for that retraining.
Okay, let's look at the mechanism then. Before we get to the specific filters Paul lists, we have to talk about the hardware. Why is our brain so bad at this by default? The source gets pretty technical here about the biology of anxiety.
It does, and this is where modern science really validates the ancient text. The source explains a fundamental quirk of the human brain. The brain does not effectively distinguish between a real present threat and an imagined one.
This is the tiger in the room scenario they talked about.
Right. If a tiger walks into your studio right now, your amygdala fires, your heart rate spikes, digestion shuts down entirely, and cortisol floods your system. That is a survival mechanism. It saves your life.
But there is no tiger.
Exactly. But if you sit on your couch and vividly imagine a tiger, or, more realistically, if you vividly imagine losing your job or a health crisis or your spouse leaving you, your body reacts almost exactly the same way.
The neurons fire.
The chemicals release, the whole system goes into overdrive.
So essentially, by worrying, we're physically training our bodies to be in a state of crisis for events that haven't even happened.
And may never happen. The source makes a really crucial point here. For many people, chronic anxiety isn't necessarily a disorder in the initial medical sense. It is a trained response.
Wow.
You have become an expert at being anxious. You have grooved that neural pathway so deep that it is now the path of least resistance for your electrical impulses.
That is a terrifying thought, that I've been going to the gym for anxiety every single day without even knowing it.
It is, but that is also where the hope lies. Because if it's a trained response, it can be retrained. This is the entire basis of neuroplasticity. The brain is plastic. It can be molded.
Right.
And the source connects this to another one of Paul's writings in Corinthians 10.5.
Taking every thought captive. I've heard that a million times. Usually it just means stop thinking about bad stuff.
And the source argues that is a very shallow reading. Look at the architectural language Paul actually uses. He talks about casting down strongholds or arguments. In the Greek, a stronghold is a literal fortress.
Okay.
In neurology, a stronghold is a reinforced neural pathway. It's a habit loop that is incredibly hard to break.
So casting down isn't just this vague spiritual idea, it's about proning. It's about demolishing an old infrastructure in your physical brain.
Yes, but, and this is the key insight, you cannot just tear something down and leave a void. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the human brain.
That makes sense.
If you stop thinking about something bad without a replacement, you will just drift right back to it. You have to build a new structure.
Which brings us back to the list in Philippians 4.8. The source calls these the filters.
Correct. You aren't just capturing thoughts randomly. You are capturing them to something specific. You need a new blueprint to house your mind.
Let's deconstruct these filters, because I think this is where the real practical value lies for you listening right now. These aren't just nice adjectives. The source argues each word corresponds to a modern psychological tool for reality testing.
Let's run through them.
The first one is whatever is true.
This is the baseline. In CBT, this is literally called testing the evidence. The source points out that in our modern culture, truth has become very subjective. You hear my truth, your truth. But Paul's using a legalistic term here. Is it verifiable?
So if I had the thought, everyone at work hates me, the truth filter asks, do I have evidence for that? Did someone actually say that, or is that just an emotional projection?
Exactly. Anxiety is a liar. It predicts doom that hasn't happened. It interprets silence as rejection. It engages in what psychology calls emotional reasoning.
The idea that because I feel it, it must be true.
Yes. The truth filter forces you to stop and ask, is this a fact or is this a feeling? If it's not a verifiable fact, it gets filtered out immediately.
Next on the list is whatever is noble. The source defined this as worthy of respect or dignified.
This is a fascinating one, especially for the social media age. It asks, does this thought lift your thinking or shrink it? Does it give you dignity or does it make you feel small, petty, and reactive?
That's a heavy hitter right there. Because how much of our mental energy is spent on petty grievances? Like, I can't believe he said that, or look at how stupid this person on the internet is.
That is ignoble thinking. It shrinks the soul. It triggers the lower brain, the reactive centers. Paul is saying, if the thought lacks gravity or dignity, do not let it build a nest in your head. It's basic mental hygiene.
Then we have whatever is just, and the source connects this to the victim loop.
This is critical. Just means right or fair. Anxiety often thrives on a sense of injustice. Why is this happening to me? It's not fair. I deserve better.
Yeah.
That narrative creates a victim mindset where you are entirely helpless.
And helplessness is the absolute fuel for anxiety. If I can't control it, I panic.
Exactly. Filtering for what is right just reorients your thinking towards sovereignty and agency. It breaks the loop by forcing you to look for what is right in the situation, or trusting in a higher justice rather than just stewing in the unfairness of it all. It moves you from victim to participant.
Okay, moving on to whatever is pure. This one sounds abstract, almost puritanical, but the source made it very practical.
They define pure as unmixed or unpolluted. They specifically mention filtering out cynicism and suspicion.
Okay.
When you look at a situation, maybe a boss gives you a compliment and you immediately assume, oh, they just want me to work late this weekend.
Oh, yeah. That's mental contamination.
It is. You are polluting the data with your own suspicion. You're attributing motives to them that you can't possibly know.
Right.
Paul is essentially saying, clean your mental intake. Take things at face value until proven otherwise. If the thought is mixed with cynicism, it doesn't get past the filter.
Next is, whatever is lovely. And this is where the source brought up the negativity bias.
Yes. Evolutionary biology tells us our brains are hardwired to notice threats and negative things. A tiger is vastly more important to notice than a beautiful sunset if you want to stay alive.
We have Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good ones.
Precisely. So, whatever is lovely is a counter-practice. It is an act of rebellion against your own biology.
I love that phrase. Act of rebellion.
You have to deliberately, intentionally hunt for the beautiful to balance out the brain's natural tilt toward the dark. It's physically training the reticular activating system, the part of the brain that scans the environment to spot beauty instead of just scanning for threats.
It's not just ignoring the bad, it's aggressively acquiring the good.
And finally, whatever is of good report. The source calls this selectivity.
They use the phrase mental real estate. I thought that was brilliant.
We have very limited cognitive energy. The question isn't just, is this true? Because plenty of terrible things are completely true. There are wars. There are famines.
Right. The news is full of true things.
The question is, does this deserve your mental real estate right now?
That's a nuance I think a lot of people miss. So I can acknowledge a tragedy in the world without looping it in my head.
Paul is teaching selectivity. Just because a tragedy is true doesn't mean you should loop it in your mind for 3 hours before bed. Or doom scroll endlessly on your phone. That solves nothing and it entirely depletes you. You filter it out not because you are ignorant, but because you are being a strict steward of your own mind.
So we have this rigorous checklist. It's basically a gauntlet. You have a thought and you run it through. Is it true? Noble? Just pure? Lovely? Of good report?
If it fails any of those, it's out. But here is the catch, and this brings us to section 4 of our analysis. Just knowing the list is entirely useless.
Right. I can own a treadmill, but if I just use it to hang my laundry on, I don't get fit.
Exactly. The source focuses heavily on the verb Paul uses at the very end of the list. Meditate on these things. The Greek word there is logizomai.
Logizomai. It sounds mathematically precise.
It is. It's an accounting term. It doesn't mean sit there and have a Zen moment with a candle. It means to reckon, to calculate, or to take into account repeatedly.
Repeatedly?
It implies directed, effortful computation. It's actually where we get the English word logic.
So it's active work. It's a literal mental workout.
It is not passive awareness. And the source brings in a really specific, incredible stat from neuroscience here to back this up, the 66-day rule.
Yes, talk about that. Why 66 days?
Research suggests it takes roughly 66 days of consistent repetition for a new neural pathway to become the dominant one. Not just to form it, but for it to become the default highway your brain uses.
Okay.
This is about myelination. That's the insulation around the nerve fibers that makes electrical signals travel faster.
So if you want to stop an anxious response and replace it with a peaceful one, you have to force that calculation, that logizomai, over and over for about 2 solid months.
That's right. And this explains why people quit after a week. They say, I tried thinking positive, it didn't work.
Because they are still in the resistance phase. They are hacking through a dense jungle with a machete, while the old highway of anxiety is sitting right there, perfectly paved and easy to drive on.
Paul is saying, keep hacking. Logizomai. Reckon it again and again until the path clears. The source points out that verse 9 follows this instruction perfectly. It says, and the God of peace will be with you.
And the distinction they made there was really powerful. It's not that God suddenly moved closer to you.
No, it's that your mind stopped blocking him out. The anxiety, the noise, the false narratives, they block your ability to perceive the peace that is actually already there. When you retrain the mind using this protocol, you clear the channel.
So let's get incredibly practical for everyone listening. How do we actually do this on a daily basis? The source lays out a protocol that feels very different from standard self-help advice.
It does. Here is the step-by-step. Step 1. When an anxious thought appears, do not argue with it.
Wait, don't argue. I thought we were casting down arguments.
You cast them down by replacing them, not by debating them. If you argue with an intrusive thought, you are validating it. You are literally giving it a seat at the table to debate you.
Okay, so I don't say to myself, No, I'm not going to get fired because I did a really good job on that quarterly report.
Right, because the anxiety will just instantly say, yeah, but what about that typo on slide 3? And boom, you get stuck in the loop.
Got it.
Instead, step 2, identify it and run it through the filter. Say, this thought is not true. It is not noble.
You label it for what it is.
Relabel it as trash or spam. Then step 3, replace it with a thought that passes the filter. You have to have a replacement ready to go. You can't just have a vacuum in your head.
And then step 4. And the source really emphasizes this part. Speak that new thought out loud.
Out loud.
Why out loud, though? That feels a bit awkward if I'm, on the bus or at my desk.
It engages Broca's area in the brain. It forces you to articulate the thought mechanically, which requires vastly more cognitive focus than just passively thinking it.
Interesting.
It interrupts the internal loop with a physical external stimulus. It's a pattern interrupt. The source uses this great phrase. You're not fighting anxiety, you're redirecting traffic.
I love that visual. You're just standing there waving the cars down a completely different road.
A road that you are building brick by brick every single time you speak that replacement thought.
And we have to remember the context here. This isn't some rich guy in a luxury villa writing about finding inner peace.
No. Paul was in a literal Roman prison. He was likely chained to a guard 24/7. He was facing execution. He did not have peaceful circumstances.
Not at all.
If anyone had a right to be anxious, to play out worst-case scenarios all night, it was him. But he wrote about having a peace that passes understanding.
Because he didn't rely on his environment for peace.
He had a trained mind. He had spent years practicing logizomai. He had completely rewired his brain to focus on the true, the noble, and the just, regardless of the iron bars around him.
That really drives home that this isn't about manifesting a better life or toxic positivity. It's about rigorous obedience and literal biological change.
It is. The source puts it beautifully. CBT didn't invent this. It rediscovered it. Philippians 4.8 is an encouragement. It's a protocol.
So what is the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, today?
Agency. I think that's the most empowering part of this entire deep dive. We so often feel like helpless victims of our own brains. We say things like, I'm just an anxious person, or I just worry a lot, it's who I am.
Yeah, we make it an identity.
The source argues, no, you don't have an anxious identity. You have a trained brain. And trained responses can be retrained.
But it takes work. It's definitely not a magic pill.
It takes 66 days, give or take. It takes the gym mentality applied directly to your thought life.
So here's the challenge the source leaves us with. They suggest a 66-day challenge.
Pick one recurring anxious thought. Just one. Do not try to fix your whole life at once. Identify which category it fails. Is it untrue? Is it ignoble? Then script a replacement thought that passes the filters.
Actually, write it down.
Write it down. And every single time that old thought pops up for the next 66 days, replace it. Speak the new one out loud.
It sounds so simple, but if the neuroscience is right, doing that is literally performing physical surgery on your own brain.
It is. You are physically changing the structure of your mind. You are burning a new bridge and letting the old toxic one rot away from disuse.
That is just incredible. We spend so much time and money working out our bodies or learning new skills for our careers. But the idea that we can and really should rigorously train our ability to perceive reality, that changes everything.
It moves faith from something you just feel to something you actively do, which eventually changes what you feel.
Well, this has been a massive eye-opener for me. The idea that the gold standard of mental health has been sitting right there in a few sentences for 2 millennia, it's deeply humbling.
It certainly is.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. We talked a lot about neuroplasticity, the fact that our brains physically, structurally change based on what we focus on. We become what we behold. So if that is true, if you could see a physical 3D map of your brain right now, shaped solely by your last month of thoughts, what would it look like? Would it look like a well-ordered fortress of peace or a chaotic, muddy storm? And knowing what we know now from this deep dive, what do you want that map to look like in 66 days?
That is the question.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll catch you on the next one.